Howdy guys, welcome back to BRG Photography. This is Ben, and if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I use Affinity Photo for all of my portrait retouching. And I do love Affinity Photo. However, there are some kind of long-standing bugs that have been around basically since version 1, at least for me, and even across 2 computers. And so it does sometimes make Affinity Photo a little bit frustrating. And so I want to make this video not just to complain about the bugs, but to ask you guys, like, do you also experience these bugs? Because sometimes I wonder, am I the only one who's having these issues? So in this video, I'd love to hear if you guys are also experiencing these bugs, and if you are not, or you did and you fixed it, like, how did you do that? And if you're not experiencing these bugs, then maybe there's something on my end or my system that I need to correct to kind of resolve these issues. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump right into some of the kind of bugs that kind of annoy me. I also want to talk about a few feature requests, which I think if implemented would really make Affinity Photo just absolutely perfect. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so for me, the biggest issue that I've had with Affinity Photo so far has to do with macros. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I love macros, and I have a whole bunch of custom macros to help speed up my retouching workflow. The problem is that I cannot activate those macros using my Wacom tablet. So if I go over here, I have a portrait, I'm ready to start retouching. The first thing I like to do is go to my retouching suite because that sets up all the layers I need to my retouch. But if I use my pen to go over here and click on them, nothing happens. Like, I can click down, I can hold down, I can double click really fast, I can click a bunch of times, and none of the macros that I've made will activate using this pen. But if I go over to my mouse, now I'm on the mouse and click on it, works, right? I can do a dodge and burn. There we go. I can go to my color grading suite, it pops up. But let me go ahead and delete and do that. Now if I go back to my pen and try to do my retouching suite or my color grading suite, nothing. And for whatever reason, like, I'd say 1 out of 100 times it might actually activate on the pen. Like, if I just kind of keep clicking around, sometimes it will just like activate. But as you can see here, using the pen, nothing works. But if I go to my mouse, there we go. So this is just kind of annoying because I like to use the pen as much as I can, and it just kind of slows things down when I have to like go to my mouse, go to my pen, go to my mouse. I'd rather just have everything work with the pen. So whatever this issue is, I hope it gets resolved at some point in the near future. Every time a new update comes out, I'm always excited to see if it works, but so far, no go. All right, so that's my first kind of main issue. So another issue that I often come across is the select all layers kind of bug maybe. So here's that same image, I've retouched it, I've done some kind of cool like old magazine effects to it, and I want to see the before. I want to do a quick before and after. So usually the way that I'll do that is you can go over to select and you can say select all layers. And what it will do, it'll select all the active layers minus the background layer that's locked. And that way I can just click one of these layers to turn them all off and on, and I can quickly see a before, after, really convenient. Also for me, I've set a keyboard shortcut to this. So for me, I set my tilde key to do that. So I can quickly with one click, select all my layers and turn them off and on. Now, an issue I come across quite frequently is sometimes, let's do this one for an example. If I want to see my before, I will press my tilde key. You can see it selected all the layers except the background layer. The background layer is not selected. And if I turn off the layers, I get this checkerboard pattern that pops up in between, which kind of makes it distracting for me to see my before and after. So let's take a look at another example. Same thing here. I want to see my before. I'm going to hit my tilde key. It's going to select all my layers except my background layer. And here now I've got this like half glitch, right? And sometimes, let's see if it does it here. If I zoom in really close because I want to see like maybe the skin work I've done, I press the tilde key. And a lot of times I'll get something like this where I just get a blank screen. Now, as we can see, the background layer is activated. We should be able to see it, but we can't. Now, if I start moving around the frame, it starts to kind of come back. And if I zoom out and then turn them back on, now the issue has kind of corrected itself. But if I zoom back in again, let's see. We get back to this blank screen, which is kind of annoying because sometimes I want to see my before and after and I have to like zoom out again or sometimes I have to, you know, toggle this on and off for it to work. It's just kind of an annoying bug that happens more frequently than I'd actually like. And at first I thought it was maybe because I have a lot of layers, or there's something in here. Here's another example. I'm going to press that tilde key, and again I get this big bug. If I zoom in really close, I have the same bug where I'm just presented with a blank screen until I start moving around. Then it kind of like clears it. And then once I zoom back out, then the issue kind of corrects itself. So just kind of an annoying little bug that, you know, I don't really know what the cause is. At first I thought it was maybe too many layers. Like here's one example, and we can see here I'm getting the same kind of bug, and it's kind of distracting because I can't see the kind of cool effects I did. But here is another shot from the same shoot with just as many layers, but no issue whatsoever. So this is something that's just kind of annoying. I'd love to see if you guys actually have this as well, if it's just me, but that's one of my major kind of like annoyances. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. So another bug I often come across is, let's see, this one here. So for example, if you've watched some of my other videos, when I'm retouching, let's say the hair, you know, one thing I'll often do is I will kind of erase all of the kind of flyaways just to kind of get a nice, smooth, clean edge. And then usually what I'll do on a new layer is I will take a really thin brush. I actually have a hair brush here, and I'll use a paintbrush, and I'm going to hold down my Option key as I click down to sample one of the colors from the hair here. And then what I'll often do is just kind of like start painting in kind of my own hairs. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll hold down the Option key, sample a color to get like the nice hair so it looks natural, maybe sample again, draw in some more hairs, and I'll just kind of do this as much as I can because, you know, there's a lot of hairs in hair. And I'll just kind of do this, you know, for a good minute or two, trying to make the hairs look natural. The problem is that sometimes, and I'm not sure if it'll actually do this now because it happens kind of infrequently, but enough times for me to notice, is that when I'll come over here and sample a color, I'm going to try just for a few more seconds to see if it actually happens. All right, so it's not going to happen, but I'll explain what happens. A lot of times I'll come over here and I'll sample a color, and then instead of actually sampling the color below it, it will always give me a fully saturated red like that. And then all of a sudden I'll paint and I'll have this really bright red streak because it's always the same color. It's always this fully saturated red at 360, 150. And I'll start painting and I'll do like a couple of red streaks. I go, man, what is that? And I got to go back and undo and then like resample. And then it usually gets back in, it gets back to working normally. But this is not, I would say, a huge bug, but it's definitely something I encounter enough times where I would consider it an issue. So again, this is something I'd love to hear if you guys actually have this problem as well. Or again, is it just me and my computer? All right, so that's that kind of bug. Okay, so the next bug that's always present, and this may be because I've customized my keyboard so much, but for me, I've customized my brush size keys to be the F and G on the keyboard. This is mainly because it allows me to keep my hand in one place. And I think by default, the keys to adjust the brush size are left bracket and right bracket. But because I'm changing the brush size so frequently and zooming in so frequently, I hated that my hand haven't moved back and forth. So I'll make a video about this, but I've customized all my keys so my hand basically stays in one place on the keyboard. Anyways, my keys for brush increase and decrease is G and F. It makes it really easy for me because I can also zoom in really close and I can change here and I can zoom out and my hand doesn't have to move too much. And so with every single tool, whether it be the in-painting brush tool, I can increase the size using F and G, clone stamp, like pretty much any really brush tool works. Even if I were to go to, let's see, the, what do you call this? The selection brush tool, that works. I can make it bigger. I can even go to refine. And then same thing here, like my matte brush and my other brush also works fine. So the problem, let me delete this. is with the Liquify persona. When I go to Liquify persona, even though all of my brushes have been adjusted to be F and G to make it smaller and bigger, they don't work on Liquify. With the Liquify persona, you have to use the brackets left and right. And so I don't know if this is something specific to the Liquify persona or if it is a bug where these should also change with my F and G keyboard shortcut. So not a huge issue, but sometimes I forget and I'll still be pressing F and G and I'll get an error code, or F, I think by default switches to the Liquify freeze tool. And even if I turn this tool off in the keyboard shortcuts, F and G still don't do anything as far as brush sizes go. It has to be left and right brackets. So for me, I just have to remember that in Liquify persona, the left and right bracket will adjust the size of my brush. Anywhere else, I can do it with the F and G key. So it's just kind of a annoying issue. Okay, now the next issue might be more relevant just to me, because if you don't know, like I live in Tokyo, and so on my keyboard or on my computer, I have two languages. I have the English keyboard and the Japanese keyboard. And so I can access it with a button on my keyboard here. Where is it here? And you'll see this little key thing here where I can choose between English or Japanese. The problem is, and it's only with Affinity Photo, is that a lot of times I'll be painting or I'll be doing something on my thing, and as you can see, this does not go away. And a lot of times it'll like pop up in like a really weird spot and it'll just be stuck on the screen and I can't get rid of it. I'm trying to like, even right now, I'm trying to like click it for it to go away, and it won't go away. And zoom in, and right now you can see it's kind of permanently stuck here. If I do the language thing, go back to English. Okay, it disappeared. But a lot of times it'll just like pop up in the most random spot, and it'll be in a really annoying spot. It'll be popping. If you pay attention to some of my videos, you actually might see it because it just pops up sometimes, and I can't get rid of it. And the reason why I say it's an Affinity bug is I have never seen this issue in any other program I use, whether it be Capture One, Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, a browser like Safari or Firefox, nothing. It never comes up. Only in Affinity Photo does this keyboard switcher text bug just always kind of appear at the most random times. And it can be quite frustrating because a lot of times I might be in here, you know, trying to do some healing or something or dodge and burn, and it'll pop up like right in the middle of the screen, and then it won't go away. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just trying to get it to go away, and it doesn't. So that can be kind of annoying. But anyways, that's just that. All right. Another issue that I come across with sometimes is with dodge and burn. So if I were to dodge and burn here, so let's say I already done some dodging and burning, you can see like this, and usually I'll work in black and white, and I'm going to go to my dodge layer here. I'm going to set my brushes to black and white. I'm going to go to my 2% flow, and let's say I want to get rid of some of these dark spots here on the chin. Make my brush a little bit smaller. Make sure we actually have a brush selected with white. There we go. All right, and I'm gonna kind of just, you know, start trying to dodge in here to make it lighter. And then what I'll often do is holding down, at least for me, I set Shift and G as my keyboard shortcut to switch between the layers really quickly. This is really convenient because it allows me to switch layers without having, okay, there you go. There's an example. Is you can see right here, when I did that quick switching, it disabled the retouch dodge layer and then it came back. So you can see I have this bug where even though the dodge layer is on, when the mouse cursor goes over it, it activates. And now if I zoom in, then it goes away. And so this usually seems to happen when I'm switching very quickly. If I'm doing some dodging here and I want to dodge and I'm dodging like this and I want to switch to a burn, and I do some burn to make it darker, and I switch back to dodge, go back to burn. A lot of times I'll see something where I'll have a bug like that where all of a sudden between switching between layers, it just deactivates that layer and kind of causes a distracting little bug like you saw earlier. So I'm actually glad that one popped up because again, this is a bug that doesn't pop up all the time, but it pops up enough, or it pops up enough where it can be kind of like distracting, especially when I'm doing a lot of really quick dodge and burn work to try to do some stuff like this. You know, it can be distracting when, because then I can't tell like what I've dodged and what I've burned because it's showing me like the wrong layer. So that's another issue that comes up sometimes, not a huge deal, but something that does crop up and has only really started cropping up, I would say, after version 2. So this is definitely something kind of new. All right. The next one is, this may be visible on the screen, but I've noticed that sometimes my brush size icon will disappear, where I'm trying to do some brush painting or dodging and burning. And actually I did notice it a little bit earlier. Let's go back over here. Let me turn this off. Let's pretend like I'm going to select her to get her away from the background or something. Okay, so let's go to refine. And sometimes when I come over here where I should have a paintbrush tool like it is right now, it will still be the arrow icon. So even though I'll switch to a brush, let's go ahead and select this. Even though I'll switch to a brush, I'll still have this icon, this normal pointer icon, even when I have the brush tool. And a lot of times I'll start painting with this icon before it actually switches back to the proper brush icon. This is something that actually was a very early bug with Affinity Photo 2. I think I even made a video about it, and it has resolved itself almost, where I think when Affinity Photo version 2 first came out, it was like every single time, like it always, no matter what, you never got the actual brush icon. It was constantly disappearing. But it seems to be a lot better now, but it does still happen every once in a while. And I have noticed too that sometimes when I'm recording these videos, for whatever reason, the screen capture will not record my brush stroke. I've even had to make notes about it where I've had to say, hey, sorry that the cursor disappeared, because for whatever reason, Affinity Photo just decided the cursor wants to be gone. So again, another small issue, not a deal breaker, but just something that's kind of like, annoying. Those are the kind of the main bugs that I've come across. I think the first two are the main ones. Is like, I'd really like to be able to activate my macros using my Wacom pen and tablet and not have to constantly go back to the mouse. Okay, and so for this last section, I just want to talk about a few like features that I wish Affinity Photo would implement, because these seem really simple, but it would make certain things just go a lot faster. So my first big one is the clone brushes. Now, I made a video on clone brushes recently, and I talked about that when you're using a clone brush, especially on a new layer, you need to make sure that you are set to current layer and below. And from Affinity Photo version 2, this was the default for the clone stamp brush and the healing brush. But the in-painting brush and the patch tool are still defaulted at current layer. So every time I use the in-painting brush tool, which I use all the time, I always have to come up to current layer and switch it to current layer and below. I wish that either that was set by default, or if there was a preferences where you could set it in preferences and say like, hey, I want the clone brushes to be default to current layer or current layer and below. That would just speed things up a lot faster, so I don't always have to keep reminding myself to come up to use the patch tool. Oh, before I use it, I gotta go up to current layer and below. And it's annoying, right? It's kind of annoying because even if I close this image and open it back up, I still gotta go back and reset those. So that's one issue that I wish they would just add like a little setting for, because it would just make things so much easier. And I think when you're working non-destructively, you're usually always going to be working with current layer and below. I can see use cases for the in-painting brush tool for really quick fixes, but for me, I like to do everything on separate layers, and having it set to this by default would just make things so much easier. All right, the next one's just like a little nitpicky. Is before, I think with Affinity Photo version 1, the toggle visibility button was a little bigger, and now it's this little dot, and it's not a problem at all, but I do wish it was a little bit bigger, because it can sometimes be hard to hit with my pen to do that, because oftentimes I'll move over and I'll hit the lock key by accident. Again, this is super nitpicky, but I only mention it because before in Affinity Photo version 1, I think it was like a box with a check, and it was a bit bigger, and I was kind of disappointed that they changed this small dot just as a little bit harder to hit. I mean, heck, I'd rather have the whole right side be a big box, just easy to click on and off. Which also reminds me that I would love to have a keyboard shortcut that you could just toggle a layer on and off. Right now, all you can do is you can go to layer and you have a hide and a show. So you can set keyboard shortcuts to the hide and show, but you can't have them be the same button. So I'd love to have one key on my keyboard where I could just be like, well, not that key, where I could just do like one key and swap between like the layer being on or the layer being off. Instead, I have to do two keys and I always forget which one's which. And you know, like I said, if I do something like this, I like to see my before and after. And yeah, it's just a lot easier if I just had one button or one key on my keyboard where I could toggle them on and off. That would be really, really swell. And I think one last cool feature would be really helpful would be if the zoom zoomed into your cursor, because a lot of times I want to zoom into the face, right? So if I do this, if I start zooming in, it just zooms into the center of the image, and then I can just easily scroll up to the face. Where I'd love it to where if I had the cursor right here, it just zoomed to where the cursor is. Now I know that there is the zoom tool and I can do that and it'll zoom in where the cursor is, but the idea is I want to be on my brush tool and zoom in, zoom out while painting or in painting or dodge and burning, and not have to constantly be like moving, scrolling around at the face. I would love to have a setting where I can just like zoom to cursor. So wherever my cursor is, it just automatically zoomed to that. I know that you can do, I think hold down the Option key will kind of do something similar. Let me see. If I hold down the Option key, and I use my scroll wheel on my mouse, it will zoom to the cursor, which is convenient, but I wish it did it also with the keyboard shortcuts, because that would just be a lot easier, because normally I'm using two buttons on my keyboard to quickly like zoom in and zoom out. It just makes the process a lot easier for me. But anyways, that's just me. Okay guys, this is probably much longer than I anticipated it to be. And again, like I'm not knocking Affinity Photo because I love it and I've been using it for, I guess, probably almost 5-6 years at this point. But there's just still some things that have just been around for so long that I wish that they would fix, or some tiny little features I wish they would implement that would really make this the Photoshop killer, as I guess they like to say. But anyways, I'd really love to hear your guys' experience. Like, is there bugs that you're experiencing that I'm not experiencing, or are you experiencing the same bugs that I am? Did you fix them? Were you unable to fix them? And as far as features, like what are some other cool features that you guys wish Affinity Photo implemented? A lot of times, like you're unaware of a cool feature until it comes out and you're like, oh man, I'm really cool, or I'm really happy that came out. I didn't even think about how useful that would be. So yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Affinity Photo, their bugs, feature requests, wish lists, all that kind of cool stuff. And yeah, I guess until then, I will see you in the next video. All right, guys, peace.